I finished season 1 of The Chosen last night. Just been so moved by this series about Jesus, especially the character of Mary Magdalene. And today's gospel about Jesus' first exorcism called me to really reflect a lot more on Mary Magdalene, because in the first episode you see Jesus' first exorcism for Mary Magdalene. I was so moved by Mary Magdalene that I thought, okay, what would it have been like for the actual actress? So I looked up her name, Liz Tabish, and she shares this amazing story of how she was actually she had been going through severe depression for about 3 years, and she decided that she was going to take a break from acting. And so she told her agent to no longer submit her name for any acting roles. And she moved back home with her mom, and she's just like, I just got to take a break, no more acting. And her agent submitted her for this role of Mary Magdalene in The Chosen. And he sent her the transcript. And as soon as she started reading the transcript of Mary Magdalene, she just broke down. She started crying. And she said that it wasn't as though I could play this role. This was me. She realized, this isn't just, I can do this. She said, this is me. And she shares about how transformative it's been. And I've felt that as well throughout The Chosen, and it's been a transformational thing in my life when I read the Gospels to say, this is me. I am Mary Magdalene. And so the invitation for all of us today is to really deeply identify with this character of Mary Magdalene. So what's beautiful about her is that it's in big things in our life and in small things. So in the big things of our life, some of us, like Mary Magdalene, might have had very traumatic pasts. When you see the story of Mary Magdalene, you see that she lost her father at a very young age. She was physically abused by a Roman soldier. She had these severe headaches that would constantly come. And then she gave into this, the darkness. She gave into this other life, and she tried to forget her past. She took on a new name, and she was suicidal. And it just got worse and worse, and she ended up going to a bar and trying to get drunk to drown out all of her worries. And so we see not only this traumatic past, but also these deep sins that she was immersed in. And Jesus' first words to Mary Magdalene, "That's not for you." You know, the first words that Jesus speaks in the series of The Chosen, he enters into, he's at the bar of the red district, like the red quarter, the worst place you could possibly be. Jesus enters into her darkest time and says, "That's not for you." And then Mary Magdalene tries to run away, and Jesus chases after her. And he proclaims these words that transformed her life, and she experienced such deep healing. I just absolutely love in episode 2 how Nicodemus comes to her and he's saying, "Tell me what happened." And she said, "All I can tell you is I was one way, and now I'm completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him." And she said, "I am redeemed." It's just so transformational. And so for some of us, when we have a traumatic past, or just struggles with our past, or big sins in our life, big addictions, attachments, we're called to really identify with the character of Mary Magdalene. To really see ourselves at that bar, reaching for whatever that addiction is, whatever that sin is, and to really feel Jesus put his hand on our hand as we're grasping for whatever our addiction is, and to hear Jesus speak to us, that's not for you. We so deeply need to identify with Mary Magdalene in that experience. Or just when we think about our past and we think about our past failures, it could be as a parent, you look at your children now and you just can't help but think of all the ways that you failed as a parent. Or maybe you have actually a traumatic past of physical, emotional, psychological abuse. Or you, like Liz Talbish, you might be going through a long period of depression, lost a loved one. It just feels like on and on, this huge litany of all of these bad experiences in your past. We just need to have a real experience of Jesus placing his hands on us and saying, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you." So I constantly go back and back into these scenes, like I press repeat on the episode and keep entering back into these scenes. It's like Liz Tabish, it was the most authentic form of method acting for her. Like in method acting, you're called to bring all of your past experiences and memories and emotions and try to fully identify with the character. Well, that was so authentic for her, and it's like, that's actually what we're called to do all the time with all these characters in the gospel. We're supposed to say, like, I am Mary Magdalene, like this is being lived out in my life. And so for us, like one of the real concrete ways that we can experience Jesus entering into our sins, our addictions, or just our troubled past is through confession. For our sins and addictions, confession is so powerful for Jesus just to enter in and say, that's not for you. You know, in today's gospel, we hear about an exorcism. And exorcisms are real. I've spoken with 4 exorcists. And exorcists say that confession is 100 times more powerful than an exorcism. An exorcism just opens you up to God, to get back into a relationship with God. Confession guarantees God entering into your life. They say it's 100 times more powerful than an exorcist. And one of the things that happens in an exorcist is an exorcist takes his stole and lays it over the person who's trying to be set free from demonic influences. And the demons absolutely hate it when the stole comes out because they know how powerful confession is. One person said, an exorcist is like a little squirt gun on the level of grace, and a confession's like the biggest super soaker you could ever think of. And confession is not just an experience of the power of being set free from sins and addictions, but it's also an experience of healing. And that's where we can bring our troubled past to the Lord and just lay it out all to him. I've had a couple of times in my life where I've done a general confession, where I've literally just said anything about that's happened in my past that's been a burden to me. And I've experienced so much healing, continual deeper levels of healing. So don't be afraid to go to confession and just lay it all out on the priest, your entire history of things that trouble you. So we have this opportunity to identify with Mary Magdalene and experience the power of Jesus to break into our sins, addictions, and also to bring healing to us that we so deeply need. So sometimes in our life, like 2 weeks ago when I first watched it, I was crying like multiple times because it was just such a time for me when I needed Jesus just to enter in to my attachments, addictions, sins. It's also a beautiful thing about Mary Magdalene is that Jesus enters into the small things too. And like we see this in episode 2 at the end. Mary Magdalene, she's like trying to live this new life. She has this Shabbat dinner and she's just worried about like the normal worries of life. And she's trying to figure it all out. And all of a sudden there's a knock on the door. And it's Jesus. And he's like, "It's good to see you, Mary." And she's just shocked that he would want to enter in. And so she's like, he said, "I don't mean to be rude, but can I come in?" And she's, oh, of course. Like, I never thought that you'd want to come in. And just the peace that he brings to just this normal worry of life, like trying to host a dinner with guests. Jesus is knocking on the door. And so it's beautiful how Jesus not only wants to come into the big things, but even the small things, like just the daily worries. Like preparing for this homily, it's so easy to get worried about things. It's like I just experienced Jesus, he's just knocking on the door, wanting to enter. That's such an important time of daily prayer. It's just when we experience a worry, just any worry, Jesus is just knocking on the door of that worry. Like, yep. And he's not going to barge in. He wants permission. So that's a beautiful time just to start out in prayer. Like, we realize we're worried about something. Jesus is knocking on the door. We heard this in the responsorial psalm. Today you would listen to his voice. Do not harden your hearts. Like Jesus is knocking on the hardened heart that we have. He wants to enter in. He wants to enter into that worry. And so it's so beautiful is that Mary, when you, in one of the future episodes, episode 5 of the Wedding Feast of Cana, the other apostles are worried about, like, where are we going to sleep? And Mary said, with him, I've learned to stop worrying about these things. Like, what a profound testimony as well. With Jesus, I've learned to stop worrying about these things. So it's the invitation for all of us from like the big things. Like all of us struggle with big things, whether it's just a dark past, troubles in our past, sins, addictions, whatever it might be. Allow Jesus to break in. It might be confession this week. Just choose, make that decision. Like, yes, this week I'm going to allow Jesus to break in and also bring healing to my past. But it's also just daily life. And that's the beautiful thing about Mary Magdalene. Like, she actually does life with Jesus from now on. She's one of the unmarried women we heard about in today's second reading, where she just is unhindered devotion to the Lord. That's what we just read. And she actually starts to do life with him. And she learns, with him, I've learned to stop worrying about these things. You know, in watching The Chosen, I've realized there's a huge difference between being some passive viewer of The Chosen, watching it as just another TV show, versus being an active participant, like method acting, in which you actually bring all of your experience and fully identify with the character. We're actually called to enter into these stories of the Gospels, to say, I am Mary Magdalene, and I'm being set free, I'm being healed, I'm being released of all my worries. Like, this is the story of my life. So often we do things like binge Netflix. Well, one of the popular hashtags for The Chosen, binge Jesus. So I invite all of you to stop binging Netflix and start binging on Jesus.